Chiefs star wide receiver Rashee Rice has already been ruled out with a right knee injury as a result of some unfortunate friendly fire from his quarterback Patrick Mahomes here, as Mahomes was trying to tackle the defender after his interception. In this video, we're going to take a closer look at the play, what exactly I think could have happened in terms of the injury mechanism. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Dr. Brian Sutterer, and the goal in this channel is to teach you more about the medical side of the sports world. So we're going to be taking a look here. Rashee Rice, of course, we're dealing with a right knee injury. He's been ruled out. We saw him carted off the field, and really just an unfortunate, combination of bad luck kind of play. Of course, Mahomes had thrown the interception here, and I understand as a quarterback, right, you're not really experienced on making tackles. What he does with just kind of lowering his head to try and go in here, number one, you're trying to take out the defender's knees, which is a risky play in and of itself. But then, of course, because there's no real sense of where his body's going relative to the rest of his team, he ends up leading directly with that right shoulder into Rashee Rice's knee, causing a hyperextension. So here we see it's also just unfortunate timing because Rice's foot plants right at the perfect time to anchor in the ground as Mahomes is falling into him. And so if this had happened a split second sooner or later when that anchor point is not firmly established on the ground, you don't get all that force from the hyperextension pushing backwards. We can see that foot rotates out a little bit. What that's going to do, of course, is it's going to rotate that leg. So it's going to put a little bit of external rotation on the leg, which means that as Mahomes falls into him, it's going to put his knee into more of a varus position, meaning valgus. That force is coming from the inside of the knee, pushing outwards. That's going to be more of a varus load, stretching the outside of the knee while you're having this hyperextension. Now, when it comes to a hyperextension injury, there's a couple different things that we look at and consider, and we can't see them all very well in just this view or from the other replays that were available. Number one, we care about the degree of hyperextension. So about in this position, Rashee's leg is going to be neutral, right? Where the knee is straight, that's a neutral position. Hyper means extra, so hyperextension is extra extension, where it gets forced even more beyond that straight point than we want to see. And so in that case, that's the back of the knee being pushed backwards. Ideally, we can see hopefully a little bit of the degree of hyperextension. So if you theoretically kind of draw a line down this way, potentially coming out here, it's not a one-to-one, but this does look like an excessive amount of hyperextension. If you look at the literature where they take cadaver models and they just hyperextend the knees to see when the ligaments fail, somewhere around 30 degrees tends to be a key point, but it also matters how much of that varus or valgus force is being imparted. In this position with that varus force, you're going to stretch that back outer portion of the knee as well as potentially injure the ligaments inside the joint. So with the hyperextension, there is possibility of things like ACL, PCL tears, and in this case, I think more specifically something like an LCL or posterolateral corner. So look here at the play one more time. We'll then go talk about our anatomy to look at those structures. So now with our biodigital anatomy tool here, I've shown a right lower leg, specifically here the knee. And we're going to keep a bunch of these different ligaments and structures on that we don't typically talk about because they're more often implicated with a hyperextension. The first thing that's going to happen with a hyperextension is you're probably going to get some degree of tearing of this capsule. The capsule is the lining that goes around the entirety of the joint. It's kind of like the cover around the joint that maintains that joint space, that confined space of the joint. If you take the knee, you hyperextend, you're going to get stretching specifically of this back portion of the capsule. Typically, the first thing you're going to get some tearing, some stretching of that capsule. Now, that's not anything that typically needs surgery. That's just the first sort of domino that's going to fall. The next thing you're going to see is injury to this popliteal oblique ligament that runs along the back side of the knee. Again, not something you're necessarily going to think of like an ACL needing to be reconstructed, but if you look at the position of that ligament on the back side of the knee, and now you imagine that hyperextension pushing it that way, again, you're going to get tension on this ligament, potentially causing a tear. So now if we get rid of that, and then we'll also get rid of our capsule, we're going to see more of the actual ligaments that we care about. There's a lot more ligaments out here on the lateral or outside part of the knee, but the big ones I want you to focus on is this guy right here, the LCL, stands for lateral collateral ligament. Looking straight on at the knee, it's kind of the opposite of the MCL. The MCL sits on the inside, the LCL sits on the outside. So for an MCL sprain, we're typically talking about a load coming in this way, player landing on the outside, pushing the knee in, which stretches the inside of the knee. In this case, with that leg being externally rotated, it looks like the load from Mahomes comes more this direction, causing some tension on the outer and back portion of the knee, which can cause stress and tearing of that lateral collateral ligament. There's also a really important group of structures that sits in this back corner of the knee we call the posterolateral corner. So posterior because it's in the back side of the knee, and then lateral because it's on the outside. Sometimes you can have a significant enough injury to all these stabilizing ligaments that in and of itself can require surgery and be something that puts you out for a long time. So another one of the possibilities here with that injury because of this back corner being stretched. Always a possibility to have an ACL, a PCL tear, which are really hard to predict from just the video alone. The other thing that almost always happens with a knee hyperextension is bone bruising. So whenever the knee gets hyperextended, you're going to get compression on the front part of the joint, knocking those two bones together, which can cause bone bruising in and of itself, very painful. So if we go back here to the play with Rice, now that we've looked at that anatomy, think about those structures, specifically those ligaments sitting on that back lateral, that posterior corner of the knee. Here as Mahomes comes in, initially that leg is straight, gets forced into hyperextension, the leg rotates outward as the load continues to come through, which I think is going to put stress on this kind of back posterolateral corner of Rashee's knee. Potential here, everything from something as simple as a bone bruise and just an LCL sprain to something more serious like an ACL or a PCL. Now, the fact that the team has already ruled him out this early in the first quarter of a big game raises enough concern based on their physical exam back in the locker room that they think there's something serious. If the ligaments all felt really good, if it was just a pain thing, they probably would have taken a little bit more time to rule him out. So the fact that we've gotten an answer this quickly about him being ruled out, I think is more concerning than if we had heard he was questionable for the rest of the first half, and then we find out, say at halftime, he's not going back in. Your initial physical exam tests for things like ACL tears, PCL tears, LCL tears are pretty reliable and you can do them very quickly. You don't need an x-ray. So again, when we see somebody ruled out this quickly, that does give some sense that the exam was conclusive one way or the other with what we think is going on and allowed them to make that decision. So don't know for sure severity here. I expect we're going to be looking at least a couple of weeks just with the typical hyperextension best case scenario. But again, always possibility for something surgical like an ACL or a PCL. Undoubtedly, he's going to get an MRI. Hopefully, we hear better news. That's it for the video. Thank you as always for watching. And until next time, I'll see you later. Bye.